this video I'm going to be looking at the Edexcel Business Studies Unit 3 Building a Business. It's with 50% of the total GCSE and the paper's 1 hour 30 minutes. This does have the royal approval of my teacher, so if you are watching this, which you're probably not, thank you for adding to the PowerPoint and proofreading it for me. I know the specification is changing in 2 years' time for business studies, but from what I've seen and what I've been told is that it's not going to be changing an awful lot. So if you are studying business studies at Edexcel in 2 years' time and you're watching this video, there's no need to click off because the two specifications are really similar. So yeah, just use your common sense. If you see any information, write it down. If any of the information is not relevant to you, then just ignore it. So yeah, let's get into it. Alright then, so there are 5 parts of Unit 3, and the first part is obviously 3.1, and that's all about marketing. And the first little bit about marketing, what you need to know is how businesses can find out what customers want. And to do this, they obviously use market research. This identifies the wants, needs and demands of the customer, meaning there will be a reduction in the chance of the business failing. You then develop the products based on the market research you gathered. Obviously that means that your customers will be satisfied, and then there'll be a high chance of survival. Okay, so there are 3 stages of market research. The first one is designing the research, and this is when you use primary research, which is your focus groups, questionnaires, and you use secondary research. This could be reports, articles, data, newspaper. Oops, sorry about that. This could be where you use reports, articles, data, etc. Primary research is basically getting your own information. Secondary research is using information that's already out there. Big disadvantage of secondary research is that other businesses have access to that information. Like that newspaper report you saw on the Daily Mail isn't exclusive to you. Anyone can see it, and that's the big problem with secondary research. Alright, step number 2 is you undertake the research, and when a business undertakes the research, they can't ask everyone in the world. They can't ask everyone in the UK. McDonald's can't ask everyone in the UK what they think of their new burger, but what they can do is they can get a sample group. They can get a sample of the population, and there are 3 types of sample populations. One is the random samples. This is when you just obviously pick random people. Quota is getting more of a fixed group of people. Stratified could be getting samples of people of different ages, for example, just using people of a certain age. That's what stratified is. Alright, so the business can also use qualitative opinions, which is opinions, and it can also use quantitative, which is facts and numbers. After doing all that, the business then obviously just decides to analyse the information, and they ask the question, should the business launch the product? Okay then, so let's have a look at product trial and repeat purchase. Product trials are used to raise awareness and get public responses. You'll know if your product trial has been successful because you'll get repeat customers, and that's when people go back to buy the same service or product. To encourage product trial, you can have advertising, free publicity, free samples, user testing, low trial prices, and you can target trade buys as well. Alright, let's have a look at the product life cycle. And The product life cycle is pretty easy to remember. Just think of it as a human. So obviously we're born, we're then a child, we're then a baby, we're then a child, then an adult, teenager, adult, and then when we're about 60 we start to decline, right? So a product's similar to this because it has the introduction stage, and this is when it has low sales, high costs, no profits. It then goes into the growth stage, which is an increase in sales, a reduction in costs, and has some profits. Then goes into the maturity stage, which is when there's constant sales, a reduction of costs, and a big increase in profits. Decline is when everything starts to kind of reduce. There's constant costs, it's got a reduction in sales, and there's a reduction in profits as well. Now, when we are immature, we want to extend the maturity as much as we can. So, to do this, a business would advertise more, put promotional offers on, it would lower the prices, and even changing the packaging, getting fresh eyes. This all adds to making sure there's constant sales. Next is the Boston Matrix, and so every business has a product portfolio, and you use the Boston Matrix to identify where the product is in a market. So in other words, Cadbury have lots and lots and lots of different products. They will put their chocolate bars or their products into a section on the Boston Matrix to see where they are. Now there's 4 parts. There's stars, which is when you have a high market share and a high market growth. There's problem child, which is when you have a low market share but a high market growth. There's cash cows, which is high market share, low market growth. And there's dogs, which is a low market share and a low market growth. And I've put that up there. It says, there's a little arrow from market share. It says that the total sales it has made in a certain period of time. So Cadbury would want all their products to be on star because that's the best one, but their new products will most likely be on cash cows because there isn't a large growth because it's relatively new, but it has quite a high market share, if that makes sense. Alright, so branding and differentiation. So branding is just basically making products stand out. They have their own logo, slogan, celebrity endorsement, they have their own term, symbol. Celebrity endorsement is basically when, for example, James Bond, Daniel Craig, he's a movie star, right? He's an actor, but he also has been used to sell different perfumes or different aftershaves or different deodorants, and that's celebrity endorsement. I've put a little picture there of Cadbury's. The Crunchy belongs to Cadbury's because it has its logo there, and that's branding for you. A strong brand obviously means that customers are likely to trial new products, and obviously they'll have repeat purchase. Repeat purchase, once again, is customer loyalty. For example, Apple. Ask anyone with an iPhone, are you going to go elsewhere to like an LG, for example? They're never going to go ever again, are they? They're going to have that customer loyalty. The advantage of branding is that you'll be able to charge a higher price than others, and lots of people will know the brand, meaning there'll be an increase in sales. So in other words, Heinz beans, they can charge a higher price than other brands because they have a really, really good brand, meaning that that's called a premium price. Obviously this means there'll be greater awareness and then increased sales. To make a product different, we can change its design and function, have a unique name, charge different prices. For example, budget option. What I mean by that is Samsung, they have a really expensive option and then they'll have more budget options, so it opens up to more target audiences, which is obviously good. Alright, successful marketing mix. Basically the theory is that if you have a successful marketing mix, you'll have a successful product. You should already know this, but the 4 P's are product, price, promotion and place. And it's called a mix because each of these little 4 P's affect each other. If you have too high of a price, there's obviously not going to be any chance of having sales. People will go elsewhere. And I put in brackets there, no one's paying five quid for beans, which is true. Heinz literally they can charge a higher price than other brands, but if they decided to hire it all the way to £5, no matter what the quality, no one's going to pay that much for baked beans. So you've got to keep the price balanced. That's my point there. You can make products appeal more by using different packaging to suit different audiences, or change the product's appearance and function. A high product range means that a business can appeal to more market segments. So in other words, I don't know what dishwasher do I have in my kitchen? Hotpoint. Yeah. So Hotpoint, they don't just do washing machines. They do fridges, ovens, microwaves. They do so many things, and that is a high product range for you. Promotion techniques. So there's 2 promotion techniques. There's above the line and below the line. Now above the line is when you use print, online media, television, cinema advertising, whereas below the line is when you use sponsorships, exhibitions, discounts and sales offers. Now don't confuse sponsorships with above the line, okay? Alright, so the National Lottery, yeah, they sponsor Britain's Got Talent, but that doesn't mean they're using a below the line technique. They're actually using an above the line technique because they're using television. Okay? By sponsorships, what I mean is, when you use below the line sponsorships, what I mean is your local football team, they will have a sponsor on their shirt, and that's below the line. It's to local people. Okay? The National Lottery sponsor for Britain's Got Talent on TV is above the line because it's on TV. It's going national. Okay? So don't get those two confused. But yeah, the other below the line techniques are sponsorships, exhibitions, discounts, and sales offers. And then I put place in here. Probably should have had this higher up in the slide, but this is when you make sure you have a product when they need it. So in other words, try and sell your products on the internet. It means that they don't have to travel all the way to your town to buy it. Or if you can't use the internet, at least use supermarkets, because they'll put it on the internet for you. And obviously this means global use, national use, etc. Alright then, on to 3.2, and this is about meeting customer needs. First little bit you'll need to know is about the design mix. In other words, the development of an idea or product. Okay, so a little easy diagram for you to remember this, and here it is. Okay, so first of all, the business must look at the function of the product, how well it works, does it do its job, etc., etc. Next of all, it looks at the cost, and this is it cheap to produce? If it is cheap to produce, that means we'll make more profit, we being the business. That means we'll get a competitive advantage. Okay. Then they look at the appearance, and this is how it looks. The more stylish it looks means the more likely they'll sell. For example, a plasma. If a business made those big stocky TVs, but then the business next door had flat screen TVs, the flat screen TVs are more likely to sell because they look better. This could be the same for clothing companies. However, some clothing companies haven't really got the idea yet that the clothes must actually look good. Okay, so let's move on to the next one, which is managing stock. And for this, you are expected to really know how a business just essentially keeps stock and what techniques a business would use. So first of all, little definition for you: a stock is goods available for sale, not goods that are being made, that doesn't count as stock. Only goods that are available for sale counts as stock. Too much or little stock means there'll be negative effects. For example, overspending and not selling equals a loss. To control stock levels, we use just in case, and this looks at reorder levels, the max stock levels you have, the minimum stock levels you have, or the buffer as they call that. And then you also have JIT, which is just in time. You'll probably on the exam see it be called JIT. It just means just in time production, and this is common because you don't need to worry about overstock or understock, because products are only delivered when needed, and there's no stock on the premises, so it's a lot cheaper. I put a little graph there that you might see on the exam. You might be asked to draw stuff about it, and then a little explanation. Basically the graph shows at what point they should reorder, what's the minimum stock they should have in their business, and what's the most stock they can store in their business. And obviously this is an uncertain method, so use your common sense, as I've said there. You know, it's bad because you have to predict what your reorder level is going to be like. Maybe one day out of the blue you might get 100 sales. That means you might have to. That means this whole kind of system is it just goes bad, doesn't it? Because it's basically just really uncertain method of storing stock, and just in time is a lot better for many businesses because it's only delivered when needed. Alright, let's have a look at quality. On 3.2 you're expected to just basically understand how a business ensures quality. And first of all, a little definition of quality for you. It's the minimum standard required to meet customer needs and demands. There are quality standard organisations out there now to make sure business follow these, such as the British Standards Institution, or the BSI. And as I said, these basically make sure that businesses follow their rules, and the government fund these little kind of organisations now, just to make sure that everyone's safe and happy. If you produce products with with good quality, means that you'll most likely get a strong brand. We looked at that in the 4 Ps. Terrible quality would mean obviously you're losing customers. Those customers then tell other customers, which means you'll then lose other customers. Okay. Quality control means checking if a product is to its best standard. This minimises errors. Quality assurance means making sure while in production every aspect of the product is checked by staff. In other words, when you're making a car, at every single stage the product is checked, so you don't have to go back in the future at like the final stage to repair a wheel. This means you'll have to take everything apart, so it saves time. Total quality management is a little bit like quality control, but it means that everyone involved in the product wants the product to be to its best quality, and this is seen in very, very high quality businesses. Cost-effective operations and competitiveness. Okay, so if you have low costs, it means you're a more competitive business. Productivity means how much a worker produces over a period of time. There's a little equation you might have to remember there, and productivity basically means the total output. In other words, the total the total amount of units they've made, for example, divided by the number of workers that were working on those units, and that shows that equals the productivity, how much they've earned over a period of time. To raise the productivity, you can have better training, better equipment, better quality work conditions. You can increase competitiveness by reducing costs, change suppliers, buy lots of a product. We can cut overhead costs by cutting the wages, the rent, the gas, the electricity. You're basically not using as much stuff, means that you'll get a lower cost in total. And then obviously the last kind of stage of increasing competitiveness is to relocate. If a business is finding it too expensive to work inside the UK, they'll just move out the UK. And this is where tax, wages, etc. are a lot lower, and therefore this is why most clothing companies like Primark go make their clothes or get their clothes from a different country, because wages are a lot lower, meaning that they can make more profit on the clothes that they sell. Alright then, so we'll now look at 3.3, and that is all about effective financial management. So the first little thing you'll need to know is about improving cash flow. In Unit 1 you probably looked at calculating cash flow. Well, now we need to know a little bit more about cash flow. How can we improve it? What are the inflows like? What are the outflows like? So just a reminder that the cash flow is the money coming into and the money going out of a business. The cash flows, so coming into the business, can come from loans from banks, the revenue, the business owners, etc, etc. Now, I apologise if you're not a football fan, but Manchester City spent £50 million on a player. That money didn't come from a loan, that money didn't come from revenue. Well, some of it might come from revenue, but most of it would have come from the business owner. Cash outflows are the wages, the training, advertising costs, interest on loans, the bills, repairs, stock, etc, etc. To increase cash flows, we higher the amount of inflows and lower the amount of outflows. To improve cash flow, we can increase sales revenue, we can destock, and the business can have a long-term solution. Ooh, wrong way there. There we go. Alright, so to improve profit, there's a few factors, but first of all, just a reminder that total revenue equals number of products sold times by the average price. The calculation for profit is the total money minus the total spent on the product. Profit can be increased by two ways. So a business can either cut costs, or they can try and increase revenue to increase the profit. So cutting costs would be labour, in other words getting rid of workers, getting cheaper materials, investing on cheaper things, not marketing on promotion ads as much anymore, etc, etc. Basically minimising the amount spent on specific areas. To increase the revenue, they could improve marketing, so that's kind of the opposite of cutting costs. In a way, you're kind of improving the promotion, promoting more, for example. Promoting on TV would mean that you get an increase in revenue, probably. You can get better products as well. Make your products better, you'll get more sales. Simple as that. And obviously you can change prices as well. The more expensive they are, the more revenue you'll get, which means eventually the more profit you'll get. Alright, let's have a look at break-even and break-even analysis. So break-even is when the total revenue is the same as the total costs. In other words, break-even is when the money going into the business equals the money going out. So you're making a £0 profit. The moment you make a £0 profit is when you break even. Now, break-even analysis is how many products a business must sell. So, to calculate the break-even point, we do a little arrow there to the equation. It's simply the fixed costs divided by the contribution. If you're asked to work out the contribution, that's the selling price minus the variable cost per unit. So there's a little graph there, pretty easy to really work out. The little red circle shows the moment they break even to make £0, and after that they're making a lot more. They're making actual profit. Okay, so break even is basically when you hit £0. If you're asked to work it out, there's the equation on the right. Financing growth. So a business can use internal, and that's obviously money from within the business, or external, from outside the business, to finance its growth. Internal finances of source would be personal savings, retained profit, in other words the profit kept from basically like the profit kept from selling things. You might have kept it for a long time. And then you can also, normally the last resort is then selling assets. If you sell land, you'll get money. You can then finance your business. External finances of sources would be share capital, and I've put a lot of definitions of these because they are really important you understand. Share capital can only be done if you're on the stock exchange. You can get loans from external finances. Overdrafts. Overdraft is simply when you get money that's not actually in your account. You can get trade credit. That's when basically the supplier you want to get your products from gives you time to pay for goods. You don't have to pay them straight away. And then you can get grants as well. For example, the Prince Trust is a kind of an institution or charity that aims to get young people to start up business, and they finance it themselves. And then you can get venture capital, and that's sort of like Dragon's Den. When you see Dragon's Den, if you've ever watched that, it's a pretty boring show to be fair, but if you've ever watched it, those are the venture capitalists in there. It's basically people who buy shares in a business. 3.4, and this is all about effective people management. So the first thing we need to know about is the organisational structure that a business can use. So first of all, we'll look at the divisional structure, and this is basically for really top businesses, like for example, Topman or Topshop. They use this really kind of specialised hierarchy chart. So as you can see there, they have the finance department, the sales and marketing, retail, production, human resources, advertising, and research and design. Now each one of these kind of little areas are all specialised, so it's obviously very expensive, but everyone knows their job because they're all specialised. We then have the other two you need to know, and these are a little less specialised, but it just depends what business it's used in for one. But you'll need to know the tall structures and the flat structures. The big difference between these is that a tall structure is when there are crowded messages in a hierarchy. So if we look at the flat structure on the bottom right, it has three roles basically. It has the principal, and then it goes to the heads of departments and the teachers. So if a principal passed down a message, it would only have to go through one layer before it reaches the teachers, whereas a tall structure or a tall hierarchy would mean that it would go to the principal, then 5 other heads of departments or principals. There's a lot more layers in a tall structure than there is a flat structure. That's basically what you've got to know, the differences, and what the differences are between these. The divisional one is used by really top businesses who want it to operate more efficient, and that the key point there is that each member of staff is specialised, so each one already knows what their job is. Whereas a tall structure it's really crowded. Flat structure, it's less crowded, so it's a lot easier. We then need to know about the motivational theory, and first of all, you'll need to know motivated staff. If you've got motivated staff, they'll basically work better. Abraham Maslow, he's the guy who come up with this little pyramid. We'll get to that in a second. And his key theory or philosophy was that humans must be told they're doing a good job before we're motivated. We're kind of attention seekers in a way. If we're not told we're doing a good job, we're just not going to do a good job. Then we get to the hierarchy of needs, and in other words, the kind of pyramid. and how this works is that each layer is built from the bottom upwards. So first of all, they've got to need food, water, warmth and rest, and having those 4 things or things like that means that you're good, so you go to the next layer. Then we need safety needs, we then need belongingness, we then need esteem needs, and then when you reach the top, you're then technically motivated. You've got self-actualization, you're motivated. So you've got to have basically those 4 things before you're motivated. And then people might go even further and go for the money. So it's not all about money motivation. You want to get those 4 things before, or 5 things, sorry, before you even think of giving them a pay rise. So yeah, basically having all of this will make you fully motivated. If you don't have a single layer, your staff can mean they get unmotivated. Alright, we then look at communication, and so there's 2 types of communication. Centralization is when a business owner basically makes decisions for the business. So I don't know, if Sir Richard Branson, head of Virgin Media, or Virgin, the business, wants to go and make a new plane himself, that's centralization, because the business owner is doing that himself. Decentralization is when people like directors or managers make decisions, not Sir Richard Branson. Okay, so if a manager said to a staff, okay, I'll let you off for an hour, you can go home an hour early today, that's not Sir Richard Branson making that decision there, is it? It's a manager making that decision. So centralization is when an owner makes decisions. Decentralization is when the owner doesn't make the decisions, a manager or director does. So then you've got internal communication, and this is stuff like if a manager sends a memo to a sales team, that's internal communication, whereas external communication could be a call center ringing a customer about the latest deals or something like that. That's external because it's going to customers outside the business. You've got the channels of communication. You've got vertical communication, and this is when a manager talks to a sales team, or anyone for that matter. Horizontal communication is when the sales team just talk instead. And then I put that it is important for a business to have clear instructions for it to run smoothly. So, clear instructions means that the business will run smoothly, basically. Then we've got remuneration, and this is basically the different payment systems we have. So we have a time-based system, and this is basically a wage. So the amount of hours you work, this is the amount of money you earn. You can also do overtime. So if you wanted to earn a little bit extra, you could do overtime, and that'll give you money. Salaries, however, there's no overtime because you're expected to work until the job's done. So in other words, workers are paid monthly and they have a fixed payment because there's no overtime because they're expected to work until the job's done. It's not a time-based system. Then we have a result-based system, and you don't really need to know much about this, just that if you produced, it's basically however much you produce, the then paid. Moving on to 3.5, and this is about the wider world affecting business. So first of all, we'll look at the ethics in business, and this is going to probably come up this year, so I've kind of gone in quite a bit of detail on this. So to act ethically could be things like paying a worker a worthy wage for the work they do. Acting unethically is basically stuff like paying workers unworthy wages to save profit. That's acting unethically. It's acting on the business's half before the staff. Being unethical can also to do with working conditions, like buildings. For example, the Primark disaster that happened in 2013. Like people died in a factory because it collapsed. You've probably seen it in class or something, but it's horrible, really. Advantages of being ethical means that workers receive a fair pay. This makes a positive image for the business. Also, pressure groups, who are people like, people like stand outside, protests and all that. These are called pressure groups, and if you act ethically, you probably won't get pressure groups. So, once again, that's a positive image of the business. Now, we'll look at the environmental issues. First of all, how do business affect the environment? So they can have the short term, and this is basically traffic congestion, or pollution of fossil fuels. So, in other words, if Amazon delivers its parcels by a van, doesn't it? So that's in the short term, that's bad environment issue, because there's a lot of traffic congestion made by the vans, if that makes sense. Long-term effects, this is like climate change, and this can be caused from resource depletion. Basically, a business that doesn't use renewable energy sources end up making a bad long-term effect of the environment. So this could be like climate change. Legislation laws are put in place by the government, such as the Climate Change Act, to stop them doing this, but it's not really working at the moment because not every business is using renewable energy sources and stuff like that. So economic issues affecting international trade. So first of all, the economy is basically the production and distribution of goods and services. If the economy is doing well, this means there'll be high spending. If the economy is not doing well, there's obviously going to be less spending and production for that means. Now, developed countries, which is like the UK, have a good level of economic activity unless there's like a recession, but there's not at the moment, so we've got a good level of that. Whereas developing countries, which is Ethiopia and places like that, they have less economic activity because they haven't got a lot of money to spend on stuff, so therefore businesses don't produce a lot of products. So yeah. So nations with higher incomes spend higher on imports because there'll be more buyers. So there's a little picture on the right hand side there, and this is in 2007. So the average salary or average income an American citizen got was £30,000. Okay. Now the average Ethiopian income was £510. That is insane. So that is a massive difference there. And obviously, nations with higher incomes, like America, obviously means that businesses will spend more on imports because people have got a lot more money to spend on stuff. So quality in technology, so low quality in developing countries. So in other words, in Ethiopia they'll have very bad quality or bad technology for Primark and stuff like that. So this means that businesses could actually end up having to spend money on the technology because they don't have it already, if that makes sense. So we have the import protectionist policies, and this is like your tariffs. So we are in the EU, so we don't pay tariffs on most imports, but these are here just for protection because obviously it means that there's a tax on the imports. There's quotas, which is like a fixed number of goods can only come in at a certain amount of time, and then you've got safety standards as well. So we have the BSI in the UK. The impact of government and the EU. Now obviously it's the EU referendum, so it's quite fitting. Maybe it'll come up on this year's exam, I don't know. So the UK government sets laws in many areas, for example how they trade and the way they deal with customers. The European Union made a single market in 1973, and this means that goods can be traded freely between member countries, so there's no tariffs or there's no quotas. you don't have to fix the amount of goods you put in at a certain time, and you don't have to pay any tax on the imports. Now, the UK must abide by the UK and EU laws. So, for example, tax is set by individual governments. Okay, so if you buy a packet of cigarettes, there's a lot of tax that the Conservatives put on cigarettes, and this is not from the EU. This is from our government. Regulations such as the Trade Description Acts for products is the EU law. So any product in the UK by EU law must have descriptions on it. So the EU gave us the minimum amount of paid leave for maternity rights. So yeah, they've given us a few rights, the EU, and every country within the EU must have health and safety regulations. For example, working hours. And yeah, so basically the EU have helped a lot of countries bring up the standard of work, whereas the UK have kind of just ended up kind of leaving a lot of that to the EU now, because they abide by their laws, but they still make some of the laws, like where we trade and stuff like that. Alright, that's it then. If you did enjoy this video, remember to give the video a like. Comment any questions. I might have missed a few things out. I'll comment down below when I've done my exam, and I'll tell you guys what come up and what maybe wasn't in this video that you might want to look at a little better. And yeah, thanks very much.